I'm going to call the meeting to order. Good evening. My name is John Samia, and I'm the chair of the Shrewsbury Select Board. On behalf of my fellow board members in the town manager's office, I want to welcome you to our February 11th, 2025 Select Board meeting. Tonight's live broadcast is being brought to you by Sarah Hashi of the Shrewsbury Media Connection. Tonight's meeting also will be available via the Shrewsbury Media Connection on YouTube starting tomorrow. All of our previous meetings are also available on the same platform. Before we begin, I ask that our members introduce themselves.
I'm Beth Cassavant.
Teresa Flynn.
Carlos Garcia.
Kevin Mizikar, Town Manager.
Justin Dobson, Assistant to Town Manager.
And again, I'm John Samia, Chair. Michelle Conlin will be joining remote, so all of our votes will be done by roll call vote. First item on the agenda is to approve bills, payrolls, and warrants.
So moved.
Second.
Having moved in second, and a roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlin, is she on yet?
She's
And I say aye, so motion passes 4-0. Next item is to review and act to approve the minutes of January 28th, 2025, which was a meeting, and February 6th, 2025, which was a workshop.
So moved.
Second.
I've been moved and seconded, and a roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlin's not joined yet, and I say aye, so motion passes. Next item is announcements and reports. Colleagues, any announcements?
Mr.
Mrs.
Chair,
Flynn.
I just wanted to note, so for the past, I think, 3 years, we have organized a community forum about how to be a town meeting member, and we've had some panel discussions made up of town meeting members in hopes that we could expose more people to the opportunity and to really show that it is not a significant time commitment, but has the opportunity to make a significant impact in our town. And over the past 3 years, we've had really low turnout. And so this year, we decided to take an approach where we would record kind of a commercial and push it out through Shrewsbury Media Connection, through the town's Facebook page, et cetera. And we, Taylor Galusha from the town manager's office, sent an email to all town meeting members asking for volunteers, and we did get several volunteers. So before our meeting tonight, Charles Garabedian, Colleen Corbett, Tom Moore, Michael Burns, Bridget Hilton, and I took a shot at recording this video. So Mark Serra from Shrewsbury Media Connection is, putting it together, and we think it'll be pushed out hopefully by next week. So be kind, everyone. It was a good faith effort, but really want to thank the town meeting members who were willing to participate, and hopefully it's something that we will continue to build on in the future. Thank you.
Ms. Conlin's in.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other announcements? The only announcement that I have, just a reminder, we had office hours this evening from 5:30 to 6:30. We had multiple members from the community join us. Had some really good conversations about business in town, as well as the Trails Committee. And just a reminder to the public that our first Tuesday meeting of the month across the hall will have meetings. An opportunity to speak with residents of the community from 5:30 to 6:30, and we welcome you to join us. And that's all I have. So next item on the agenda is Town Manager's Report. Mr.
Good
Mizikar.
evening, board members. As a result of the February 4th, 2025 special referendum election, resulting in upholding the action of the special town meeting related to Article 9 of the November 18th, 2024 special town meeting, which established a transit-oriented development overlay district. Staff has moved forward with submitting all required documentation to the Attorney General's Office and Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. We have received confirmation that will not be required to submit an action plan, and we have achieved interim compliance, and we are now just awaiting formal compliance notification from EOHLC. I'm happy to recognize the Shrewsbury Recreation Department for its exceptional work and dedication to the Rec Connect program, which Director Rossiter was here at your last meeting and discussed a bit about with her team. Our Recreation Department has been honored with a regional award from the Central Massachusetts Recreation and Parks Association, MRPA. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Rec Connect is a collaborative, inclusive recreational initiative developed in partnership with Northborough, Southborough, and Shrewsbury Recreation Departments. This program brings together individuals with and without disabilities, creating meaningful opportunities for social connection through structured activities and community outings. So this is a really great initiative that the director has undertaken and worked with her staff on, and I'm really happy that they are receiving the recognition that they are for this program and providing exceptional outcome to residents who participate in the program. So thank them for all their work, and congratulations on the award. I did want to just provide a quick update with regards to a number of inquiries that the select board has received and the town manager's office has received, with residents calling about increases in their natural gas bills. We've received correspondence from NSTAR providing some explanation relative to the increase in delivery charges that went into effect in November, and increased volume of natural gas consumption over the cold January and start of February that we've had. We're going to continue to get more information from NSTAR and try to post meaningful information to the website so residents can access it and provide contact information if they want to reach out directly to the company itself. Not something that's controlled by the town, but we understand residents often look to us to support them in these initiatives, and we're happy to provide as much information as we can. That's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mizikar. Next item on the agenda is public comment pursuant to Select Board Policy 31, to offer citizens the opportunity to provide public comment during Select Board meetings on matters within the board's authority. Those wishing to speak at our regularly scheduled meeting must notify the chair through the Select Board's office by the end of business on the Monday prior to our next regularly scheduled meeting by written correspondence or email at selectboard@shrewsburyma.gov. Tonight, we have one resident who would like to participate. His name is Greg Richards, 16 Hickory Drive, regarding the February 4th special election. Come on up.
All right. Good evening. Greg Richards, 16 Hickory Drive. I'm here tonight to express my concern that this board has chosen to ignore the results of the February 4th special election. You know, the election was on the original agenda for your February 6th workshop, but was removed and does not appear on the agenda this evening outside of the comments and the update provided by the town manager. On February 4th, 2,223 Shrewsbury residents voted to overturn town meeting by voting no, with only 1,398 residents affirming town meeting by voting yes. 9 out of 10 precincts voted no, with an overall margin of 61% voting no to 39% voting yes. I've yet to hear the town or any elected or appointed board validate the voice of the community. The formal press release from the town of Shrewsbury stated the referendum, quote, failed to meet the legal threshold required. The planning board, responsible for bringing the original article to town meeting, simply stated at their February 6th meeting that, quote, the attempt to override the town meeting vote relative to MBTA fell short. Prior to the election, the select board stressed the importance of affirming town meeting's decision in your recommendation to the public, often referring to the 123 to 50 vote on Article 9 at town meeting. The recommendations of the planning board, finance committee, and select board carry considerable weight with town meeting members who often rely heavily on these recommendations in their decision-making process on articles for town meeting. However, with additional time and focus on this issue, Shrewsbury voters made a different decision on February 4th. So who will validate the people of Shrewsbury? This board serves on behalf of the people, and many residents feel disenfranchised by a vote that was nearly 2-1 in favor of a no, where 9 out of 10 precincts voted no, yet the will of the people goes unanswered due to a town charter enacted in 1953 with an arbitrary vote threshold required to overturn town meeting decisions. In November, along with many others in support of the referendum, I stood out Price Chopper, having conversations with hundreds of residents as we collected signatures. Most shared their concerns about our community. Many were concerned with overdevelopment, many frustrated with overcrowding in our schools, and many worried how increasing taxes would impact their ability to remain in their homes. Are there concerns that led to this vote not valid? Is anyone going to ask why a majority of Shrewsbury voted against this board's recommendation, or do we simply move on as the preferred outcome was achieved? I think we would all agree that interest and participation in local government is low, with only 14% of registered voters choosing to weigh in on the special election. We need more people to get involved. You know, my wife is responsible for getting me involved with the community over this past year. You know, she volunteered me to host the MBTA Communities Myth and Facts presentation at the library last April, and I've become vocal ever since. You know, to help drive more participation and ensure every voice matters, I've decided to lead by example. You know, I will be running for town meeting this spring, and I encourage any resident not currently on town meeting to do the same. You know, residents have tremendous talent, and drawing upon that through genuine community engagement will benefit the entire town. In addition, I will also be running for select board. Conflict and disagreement are essential components of a healthy local government because they foster a diversity of thought and encourage robust debate. My goal in running for select board is to create an inclusive environment where every voice matters, and together we can build a stronger, more resilient community that reflects the values and aspirations of all its members. Thank you, and I look forward to the campaign.
So, ordinarily I wouldn't comment during this. You know, I disagree, and this is just me talking. So, I disagree that voters were disenfranchised. I appreciate everyone that went to the polls, but there's a balance here. So, town meeting did vote 123 to 50. There was robust debate. Those voters, members of town meeting, represented 10,499 votes over the last 3 years to be elected. So we have a form of government that has served us well. There was robust debate. There was discussion on the floor. This was preceded from March 8th of 2022, when it was originally brought forth in front of this board, and there were a lot of different discussions, a lot of different hearings. And then it was brought to town meeting. And I do believe they're informed, and there were discussions there, and there was a decision. So a lot of people voted originally for these town meeting members. This is our form of government, and it was 123 to 50. The election that happened, Shrewsbury's not unique with a percentage of 20%. They're not unique with the number of voters that are required to sign for the referendum to be on the ballot. We're not unique. You know Milton very well, and you also know Needham very well. And they're very similar to us and had the same timeline virtually, give or take a week or so on the election. And it's similar there as well, and there were different results. There's no one on this board that minimizes anybody in this town, respectfully, that we are also residents of this town. And for me, it's balance that we have a process in place and giving weight to that as well. And we have the referendum process in place, again, similar to Needham and Milton. But as we've talked about from town meeting, there were good points that you brought up, and I talked to you about that in office hours the last time, that we're doing a form of government committee. Maybe town meeting isn't the way we go forward, but right now it's what we have and it's the process that we have. So I appreciate you coming up. I appreciated the conversation that we had, but I think it's important to say we do care about the residents of our town. I just have a different opinion as to looking at weighing everything, and it's important that people voted. It's important that we had dialogue on it. It was important over the last almost 3 years, the hearings and the conversations and the opportunities to discuss. But I also think it's important that we follow the process and we move forward too. So I appreciate you coming tonight. I look forward to having more conversations with you at any time you want to have it. But that's, usually I wouldn't comment, but I think it's important to know that all residents matter. It's part of our strategic plan.
Can I make a comment back?
Well, briefly, because
No,
it's.
it's real brief.
you-
Actually, I want to clarify something you said. 'Cause I just want to make sure we're clear as to what I was saying.
Mhm.
I just felt the main reason to speak is around that there was a lot of focus on the town meeting vote and on the February 4th election.
Mhm.
But based on the outcome, there was no comments or anything about, gee, my whole point was,
Mhm.
why was the vote the way it was? And I feel as though by not talking about it at all, because it was just like, oh, that happened, yep, it's forward, it's submitted, everything's good, we're done. That's the point that I think a lot of those people who had voted no just are not, the issue is not going to be resolved by just not talking about it or saying, hey, maybe we should take a look. I'm not saying that, I wasn't trying to make a ding or anything at town meeting. I'm just saying that a lot of people voted in a different direction. And at least sometimes it's helpful just to say, is there any reflection on that and saying, why was that vote made?
Mhm.
That's all my whole point was being made. I wasn't criticizing. I understand the referendum. I know that's what we have, and I know that's why I'm doing the study. It's just validating those and saying, wow, we didn't really know we didn't really see that happening, or that outcome was not expected, or whatever it might be. That's my only point I was trying to make.
Okay.
That's all.
But couldn't an alternative interpretation be, and I appreciate everyone
Yeah.
that voted, okay? But when you look at Needham,
Mhm.
and when you look at Milton, and I know, your show number 12 at the end, you talked about the process and you looked at Milton. But couldn't you also take the position that not, more people didn't vote because they were comfortable with the process? Don't people vote? You get large turnout. If you look at over the last 5 years, a larger turnout when we had a specific item on the ballot. So couldn't you also interpret it that people were comfortable with the vetting process and the voting turnout was lower? Couldn't that also be interpretation? Again, it's not minimizing the votes. I appreciate it. Everyone that voted no had a concern, and I understand it. And you and I, we've talked about that. But couldn't it also be interpreted differently? Of course we reflect on it. That's why we're doing the government study.
I suppose so, but then you could also determine that the people, and that's why I was also making the comment about getting more people engaged in government, because that turnout for most town elections is not different from a standard town election. Even let's say contested elections, we don't see turnouts much different. 14% is actually quite average, unless there, to your point, unless there is a override debt exclusion or another special vote on there. So I think in general, I don't know if people, the whole point of this, which I kind of saw, is a lot of people who came out are people who typically didn't participate in the government. If you looked at those 2,223 people, a lot of them may not have been voting in past municipal elections, and now it's something that allows them to kind of participate. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and there are nuances with Needham. I met with one of the select board members on Monday in Needham just to have a conversation with them. So there are different things in between Milton and Needham, but I just think it's important that we at least pause for a second and say, okay, is there anything we can learn from this? Is there a way from the process that we could do better in the future? How do we ensure that some of these concerns are addressed proactively? That's my point I was trying to make there.
Yeah, I mean, fair points, and the board is always looking to do better. We look at communication and figure out ways to be more efficient with that. And again, looking at the government study, we heard town meeting, we heard the conversations with that, we heard your citizens petition on the planning board, and we are a different town with 38 to 40,000 residents, and I think it's worth looking at that. We hadn't looked at that before, and that's in direct response, and we heard residents there. So in that sense, I don't want it to be a conclusion that, hey, just because we move forward, that it's a blanket statement that we don't care about that. It's just part of, for me personally, just the balance on the process has happened, there was an opportunity, and the election is over. But what else can we pull from that is communication, again, in the form of government study. So I think if new people participate in government, that's an outstanding result of this. And I'd welcome the opportunity either during office hours or to have coffee with residents to hear their concerns. We're available to do that and encourage anyone here to do that, to meet with us. But I appreciate you coming forward. I appreciate you bringing your concerns and your involvement.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
There's a lot that I want to say, and I just don't know if it's appropriate in this forum, but I think that, I appreciate the engagement, Mr. Richards. I think that I've never had a direct conversation with you. I think that you have been highly critical of a lot of decisions. I don't know why there haven't been direct conversations. I don't know if I should be reaching out to you. Sometimes I feel like when I hear of a resident that is highly dissatisfied, maybe with how I'm performing or the job that I'm doing, reaching out to them sometimes comes across like I'm trying to change their mind. So I will go on record as saying that, if you want to talk about any decisions, I mean, I'm happy to do so. I do listen. We are a board, we're each individual, so I'm very careful not to speak on behalf of others, but I think that that's a pretty universal position of the people that are serving currently. You came in kind of hard, that you're concerned that we ignored the results, that we're ignoring the will of the people. I don't think that our reaction to the outcome of this election is different than any other election. We can certainly take your feedback and look at, what should we be doing? What do we accomplish by having, a public debrief? This was, an election where I feel like your position, there are times when two things can be true at the same time. It was a situation where, you didn't think there was any harm in waiting until July to comply. And I didn't think there was any harm in being in interim compliance. In fact, I thought there were some advantages. You think the regulations could change after they go through the proper process. And I think that there is a high probability that the final regulations are going to be very similar, if not exact, to the guidelines that we saw. You will note that 30 towns have said no. I will note that more than 100 towns have said yes. Are either of us wrong? No. We just have a different interpretation of what we thought was in the best interests of a community of 40,000 people to deal with what we have. I talked to people who signed your petition. I talked to people who voted no. And I heard everything from, well, I want to vote against MBTA zoning, which is not what this election was about. They noted that they wanted to prevent 1,500 apartments from going in, which is not going to happen regardless. And then they were just mad. They were mad at the state. They wanted to send a message. And I continue to say that, there are consequences of not following a law. And so, again, you're very critical, and that's fine. I think we learn. The best leaders learn from their critics, right? But I just want you to know that this is not because we want to do anything other than what we truly believe is in the best interest of the community. And that can be really hard when you are having to comply with what I think is a really crappy law. And I said this in a prior meeting, that if I was voting on MBTA zoning, I would be a hard no. And when people ask me, well, what are you going to do about it? I tell them the same thing that I do. You talk to your state legislators. You talk to the state level. They are the ones that are forcing this down on us. But as a select board member, just saying no and being at risk for being sued or just having the state come in and do what they want, I don't think is in anyone's best interest. So I hope that we can continue to engage in conversation and not have it always be so divisive.
Any other?
I just would like to note that the town did put out a press release the evening of the election to make sure that the residents understood the results of the election and the reason why majority was not the path to winning the question. That was really important. The communication from the town was immediate, and I want to thank Taylor Galusha because I know that it was well past working hours, and she did make sure that that communication was put out to the public. It's available at the town clerk's office as well. And I think it was also clearly detailed in the community advocate. So there was an immediate response from the town, but the first opportunity that our board would have to respond would be in an open public meeting, which is this evening.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Richards, for coming tonight. Next item on the agenda under financial is update on fiscal year 2026 budget. Mr. Mizikar.
Right, Mr. Snowden's going to come and
Sorry, Mr. Snowden.
provide an update on where we are as of the departmental budget submissions. We're, of course, nearing the publication of fiscal projection 1, which has, according to our bylaws, has to be published and provided to the Finance Committee 90 days in advance of town meeting. We look forward to going through this, primary policy document that we set every year. This is the outset of the process. Mr. Snowden will detail out what departments are requesting, the available funds, and what I think is the unenviable task of handling the difference between those two numbers.
Thank you.
Mr. Snowden.
Good evening. So, as the town manager indicated, we're going to be going over the fiscal year 26 priorities just briefly and how that was tied into the budget guidance. We'll look at the departmental requests, compare that to the bottom line comparisons to FY25. How does this also look on a functional area basis? What new FTEs were requested? Were there any other funding allocation or funding source changes for FTEs? And what some of the impacts we are seeing right now. Ultimately, we'll end with things that we are watching for and we want to make sure that the board is aware of, and then the next steps and timeline for the rest of this budget process. So this, I'm not going to read directly from this, but with the budget guidance that went out in early December, the town manager's office provided some direction in line with their strategic plan and the areas of engaged and connected, exceptional, thriving, prosperous, and sustainable, and how each of the departments could submit a budget that would meet these requests and help move the town forward with new initiatives. Next slide, please. All right. So on a bottom line basis, this slide here provides a snapshot of the FY25 budget and the FY26 department request. We're broken out into 3 categories for this review. It has the municipal budget, the shared operating support, and debt service. The difference between, and a dollar amount is $4.9 million between the departmental requests and FY25, which is about a 7.32% increase over FY25. Again, so now this is another way to look at that increase that I just referenced across the functional areas. We typically use these as our functional areas: administration and finance, public safety, which has police, fire, and emergency management, community development, which will have the building inspector's office, planning board, planning and economic development. Retirement is the town's pension. DPW covers all of the service provisions through public works. Human services and captures library, health, recreation, and the COA. And then we have debt service, and then the shared operating support. What you can see is, a quick glance on the last column under FY26 department requests. There's a lot that the departments want to do. There's a 12% increase, a 4% increase, a 50% increase requested in these budgets across the functional areas that these departments are engaged in. They are looking at how they can improve the town, and there's a lot that they do want to do. Next slide, please. All right. This was another way to look at this as well. So in the center, there's a pie chart of FY25 budgeted. And this pie chart is breaking out the different allocations of the operating budget. There is the purchase of services, which is contracted services. There's personnel services, which is salary and wages. And then there's the supplies, other, which would typically cover training, and then lastly, capital outlay. As we've gone, the $6 million request in FY26, it appears to be a lot, but if we look at how this is being broken out on a dollar-wise or on a percentage basis, it's very similar to fiscal year 25. There isn't substantial growth in one area over another, and the budget request, a large number, is balanced across the needs across all of operating support items. Next slide, please. All right. This here is a list of the new FTE requests. These would be new bodies, new people, new individuals across a number of different departments. We have internal working departments. We have public-facing service providers. So it runs the gamut across the board. It's 13.5 FTEs, which would total $1,037,757 across all these departments, spread fairly evenly, as I mentioned, across each functional area. Next slide. All right. I mentioned earlier, and we'll be touching upon this again, funding sources. So as part of our ARPA funding plan and state aid and revolving plan with the recreation, we aim to bring employees into the general fund as a financial best practice. And there is 3.15 FTEs that would be transitioning from an alternate funding source to the general fund with this department request, totaling $240,264. Now, we can take a snapshot, or we can take another closer look at FTEs. So combined, new FTEs, new individuals, plus the funding source change accounts to about 16.65 FTEs. In total, this would be 1.278 million. And this accounts for 32.8% of the total department requests. So 32.8% of the 3,896,976 that was requested by department heads is allocated to the personal salary and wage items here. Now, we are in the process of working on FP1, and with all of our funding models and projections, we are planning to be in the range of 1.4 million for available funding. That means that the salary and wage request from the departments accounts for about 91.1% of the actual available funding for FY26. Go to the next slide. This here provides a list of some of the key initiatives that were submitted by department heads across, again, multiple departments, both internal facing and external facing. This here amounts to $739,250, which was about 19% of the departmental cost and about 52% of the actual available funding for FY26. So if we go to the next slide, we combine the FTE changes and the new initiatives. That's approximately $2,017,271 in expenses, which is 143.7% of the available funding at this point in time with the budget. So this is the task we're in now, going back through, sharpening our pencils, trying to really feed initiatives where we can, and really hold everyone's feet to the fire when possible. Thank you, Justin. So this here is the capital request for non-utility, or the general fund capital requests. Across all the departments, 4.9 million in total requests came in. Typically, the town funds anywhere between 1.8 and 2.2 million in capital requests each year. So we did request that every department rank these capital requests, and we are working with them to determine where we are best able to meet these needs as it applies specifically with the strategic plan. All right, so what to look for as this budget process further unrolls. ARPA funding impacts. ARPA has been an incredible boon to the town, and we still do benefit from it, but we do need to be mindful and aware of the things that have been funded by ARPA in the past and them being rolled into the general fund. We talked about that briefly with the FTEs, the 3.15. So those are things that we want to make sure we don't have any gaps for. And we also have a number of union negotiations coming up in FY26 across all of our unions, public safety, DPW, and custodial. this custodial staff as well. So this is something else that we are trying to make sure we can plan for effectively going forward and not create any pitfalls for the town's budget. All right, next steps. So fiscal projection 1, as the town manager indicated, needs to be released 90 days before annual town meeting, which brings us to February 18th, when it will be posted online. Books will be available for the Select Board and Finance Committee on February 20th, 2025. Again, the budget will be published online as well for the community. I'm looking forward to coming back on February 25th to review fiscal projection 1 with the board. The Finance Committee will review the same projection on February 27th at their regular scheduled meeting. And then the public hearings will be held March 20th and March 22nd. At these hearings with the Finance Committee, it's open to the public, and they go essentially through each line item of the budget. Action items within the town manager's office is completing the fiscal projection 1 budget revisions. We just want to make sure we go through everything one more time, make sure there's nothing that we've missed, see if there's any areas that we can gain some wiggle room. We're communicating all the changes to the department heads. We may determine that we need to receive a reduction of a specific amount from a department, and we have an idea of how they can remove it, but we also give them the opportunity to say, let's take it from here instead of there. So we want to make sure that we're working together with the department heads so that we do not hinder any of the initiatives going forward. And then lastly, it's the completion of the physical copies of the budget book. And that will take us to the end. I'm happy to answer any questions, go into any greater detail on any of these items, but that is the FY26 overview with the department requests at this point in time.
Colleagues, questions?
I have a question.
Carlos, go ahead.
Thank you, Dave, for this. I guess maybe high level, I was wondering if you could provide some insight into how you do that refining process from the requests down to what we may see in.
That's a great question. We have a couple different standards that we set. With the budget guidance, we do ask for detail on, a budget increases. So does the department head have a plan? Have they provided backup information? Failing that, we do press a little harder. We do also look at year-to-date budget reports for 3-year average and 5-year averages to see, is there actually a growing trend here, or was maybe just a small percentage increase applied? So we will look at we have a half a year of data in FY25 already at this point in time, so we can really compare current market costs to these projections. So first, we start at the bigger levels, functional area groups, and then we'll go down to individual departments, which will then break down into individual lines, whether it's personal salaries, supplies, or other expenditures. And we're looking at major outliers, things that may be increasing 15, 20%. Does it make sense? Is it because it's an electrical cost or something along those lines? Does that help address it?
That does, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I think it's helpful for folks at home who are
Yeah.
watching to know a little bit about that process because they may look at what's here and I don't know who gets excited about a budget, but some people do, right? So if they see this and then they don't see it later on,
Yep.
Having that understanding of how we made that determination. So
Of course,
I
yep.
think that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, Michelle, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I was just curious, the $6 million initial requests that we have, are those the initial requests for budget increases, or have those been pared down and had things like initial requests removed from that before it comes to us at this point?
I think I can somewhat hear her question. I think it's just.
Got it, yeah.
This refined it all from the initial request.
Yes, so the department
Thank you.
request is as much as possible the request from the departments that has not been pared down. We have, if there was any discrepancies that were just numerical errors in the budget submission, we did address that so that didn't negatively impact any of the budgets. So if a department head accidentally didn't fill in one line, but they filled it somewhere else, we adjusted that. But this does reflect the needs and requests of the departments and their department heads.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a follow-up to
Yeah,
that?
go ahead.
So is it fair for those who may be watching, similar to prior years, it's sort of first pass is tell us what all your needs are.
Correct.
They're not given guidance in terms of like, here's your budget, here's what you have to back into. So they're essentially told like, tell us what your needs are. And then this budget process that we go through is about refining, prioritizing, and ensuring that we select the things that the budget can absorb.
That's correct, and it's a little bit of a balance as well. So the budget guidance does provide a certain percent increase that line items can grow, and anything above and beyond, they need to provide substantial evidence. Some departments are very good at providing a great amount of detail into their financial plans and fiscal plans for many years, and some departments we're working with to get them to provide more detail. But yes, it is the first pass.
Any other questions? I have a couple, but before I go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Go ahead, Beth.
looking at your slide about the new FTEs, so we're thinking 13.5 right now was the ask. And then that 3.15, we're rolling in from ARPA funding positions?
That is correct. So those are employees that, I think the fire is a great way to look at this. We model ARPA funding for firefighters off of the SAFER grant, where typically we hire 4 firefighters at a time, and each year we roll in 1 to the general fund.
Right, okay, so obviously we will not be able to support 13.5 new hires. If I'm
That's correct.
remembering correctly, were there what, 2.5 in last year's budget?
Yeah.
That is correct.
So I'm looking at the slide that's too small for people at home to read, and I'm most interested in the items that are under thriving, which I think are items that are meant to strategically move the town into a place of more consistent delivery of services to residents. Things like transforming dispatch operations to a single emergency communications group, to begin planning the emergency medical services through the fire department, comprehensive planning for and implementing of roadway safety and multimodal transportation improvements, and adopting and implementing a foundational public health service framework. So I do see those as areas that I think should be prioritized because of the broad reach across the community. And I know that these are initiatives that we have been trying to start the process on for many years, but we just don't ever seem to get enough funding to move it forward. So I guess as I look at this budget, I know it's going to be very difficult to try to prioritize where we direct the limited funds that we have. I don't see a lot of strategic investment being made, just year to year. But I would like to prioritize the items under thriving to see if we can start really chipping away at some of that. Because I do think in the long run, they could not only, save money for the town, but I think it's also a better way to deliver services.
I agree. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr.
If I could just respond quickly. As a teaser, I look forward to going through my next 12 weeks goals because a lot of that focus on the frustration with the budget that's inherent from department budget requests to the $1.4 million that we actually have to spend, and how we may be able to find a path forward in some of these is going to be a major focus of our work over the next 12 weeks as we go to town meeting and beyond. So I look forward to talking about that.
Great,
So
thanks.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
You took one of my questions. So
sorry.
No problem. It's a good question. Process-wise, we've changed, so we went from revenue, we basically went from a transition from the way we budgeted to longer-term planning and managing through expense. And part of the process was doing a shift from the way departments have looked at how we budget, where it's more longer-term and strategic. How has that gone? I know early on, it wasn't a little lumpy. Is that becoming more consistent? Are we in a rhythm now, or how is that going? Because the whole idea behind the strategic plan is to row down, right? To
Yep.
have consistent goals at all level of stakeholders. So how has that gone on? And I guess the related question is, as we look at the priorities, how are these rolled down to all levels in the organization? I mean, it's dollars and cents, but it's also, comes down to culture, right? Or priorities in terms of how everyone individually at all levels throughout the organization can move us forward. So, two questions. How has this been adopted in terms of throughout the organization, because it's a shift of how we did it, and how do all layers of the organization move forward our priorities?
Two very good questions. I think that the process is still a little bumpy, but maybe not nearly as bumpy. So the speed bumps have gotten smaller. It is continuous engagement, just as we find with the public as well. You can't say something once and expect everything to change. You need to find ways to re-engage with your team, multiple different ways to see what actually excites and inspires them. This is part of the performance appraisal process with department heads, and department heads follow a similar process with their staff. Each department essentially designs its own goals that align with the strategic plan, and the staff at every level help complete those goals. I have seen some improvement, but I think we have a long way to go. I think we're getting better at measuring this work. With the work through Taylor Galusha and Julie Tierney on the town's website, finding new ways to measure these outcomes is going to be important, because I think once more staff can see the value of this, I think it'll further benefit. So that's sort of how it's been rolled out, and the process to date, I guess. There was one other I think I only answered one of them.
It's the process to date and how all levels of the organization move their priorities forward. How does that happen? Is that the review process? Is that effectively what's done?
Ideally, it's handled through a number of touches and the review process. So we talked about functional areas. So the assistant town managers and the town manager do meet with their with department heads amongst those functional areas. Ideally, as much as weekly, to make sure that things are moving on pace. If there's any concerns, worries, things out of the ordinary, there is quarterly reviews and monthly reviews as well. That's probably the most effective way that I'm aware of that this being managed, as also discussed in department head meetings as well.
Okay. And one other question, and because Kevin, you tipped your hand on a later part of the organization with your goals. Operational efficiencies, understanding that we'll be talking about that in terms of challenges we face and opportunities to reduce cost, increase efficiencies, provide services that need to be provided. How is that done throughout the organization as well? Do our department heads continue, do we empower them to look consistently at the organization and ways to deliver services better? How does that work?
Yeah. Again, I think that comes from a strong directive and initiative from the town manager's office and their priorities. And I think, Keith and I, Assistant Town Manager Baldinger, we really try to communicate this to the department heads as well. It's the driving passion that keeps us going forward. So, yeah, it's a tough one to answer. I hear you on a philosophical level, but yes.
So it's constant communication.
Yes, I think.
Understanding that the town manager's office is continuously working with your department heads to find better ways to deliver services, but it's throughout the organization as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we may see that in, reviewing rates, reviewing policies, reviewing process improvement each year, yep.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No,
I don't know.
go ahead, Carlos.
I don't know if I have a question in here somewhere, but I feel I think recently we've heard some folks want to be more engaged with the process, and I think that's something that we've heard over the years, folks getting more involved. And so I guess I was just curious on how, or what is the best route for a citizen who may be watching to provide some feedback on this, on the budget. I know we have our public hearings in March. I know from my previous experience being on Finance Committee, engagement was not as high as I had hoped. So I guess I was just thinking about, what are some ways that we could try to encourage folks to attend that or provide feedback for that process?
Yeah. I think we can go back to one of the comments from Teresa Flynn earlier, and as much as we can encourage residents to reach out, I enjoy getting emails when someone asks a budget question, and it does happen, and it happened as well working in DPW on the water and sewer rates. There is no wrong question, and it's an opportunity to explain something that I look at a different way. And if that then works for people, that's really exciting. We're not as scary as we may look, so just encourage people to reach out.
Thank you. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? All righty. Thank you, Mr. Snowden.
Thank you.
No action required tonight. Next item on the agenda under meetings, hearings, it's a public hearing. To review and act on the request from Eversource Energy for the installation of a gas main and a related road closure for a portion of Green Street from Appaloosa Drive to the Grafton Town Line. Good evening.
Good evening. Keith Baldinger, Assistant Town Manager for Operations, filling in for DPW Director McInerney, who's across the parking lot at the Sewer Commission meeting. He sends his regrets, mostly because you have to look at me, not him, but that's what it is. So, tonight, I'm here with Dan Bastura from Eversource. They'll be requesting a road closure for the installation of a gas pipeline on Green Street. The plan he will present is the result of extensive collaboration with the Shrewsbury DPW team to minimize disruptions to the community, because this is an extensive project. While Dan will go over the details, I think it's important to note that the DPW team has played a key role in establishing project requirements, including road closure conditions, solid waste collection schedules, snowstorm coordination, and road restoration standards, all of which were outlined in a memo from Highway Division Nick Rebecca that you have received. So with that, I'll let Dan get into the details.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm Dan Baxter. I'm the construction manager for the Eversource out of the Southborough area. So obviously we're here tonight asking for permission and approval to work during winter moratorium on Green Street, and also for the road closure. The road closure, I can go into that a little bit more once we get there, but that's it's a real safety concern for us, and I believe the town, with just keeping everyone safe. So we just kind of want to start with the project scope. We're installing new 8-inch gas main from Appaloosa Drive up down Green Street to Centennial. We'll be ending at Centennial. This is part of the UPS project that is moving into the Grafton, Shrewsbury on the line right there. With that being such a big project with UPS, it's an additional draw on our system. So adding this, it'll be a new 8-inch plastic main, and it's about 7,500 feet of installation that we'll be doing. So that, Justin, if you go to the next slide. So kind of leads me to our traffic management plan. We're working together with the police department, the DPW directors and everyone. We came up with this plan of closing the street from Appaloosa down to Centennial in that area there on a daily basis. We've decided and come up with a plan with the police department to employ 3 to 4 police officers a day to help with traffic in and out. It'll be, our traffic plan is kind of basically detouring everyone on Hartford Turnpike and then down Centec Drive. Yeah, where the cursor is. And then at both ends where the road closure will be, we'll have a detail officer helping people around with plenty of signage. And then we'll also, on Green Street where the crews are actually working, we'll have a detail officer to be able to help people that are residents coming in and out of their driveways, to just kind of show them which way is the easiest way for them to get out. Usually with a road closure like this, and basically on any of our projects, the crew and our union inspector is there every day, speaking to the residents, keeping them informed. If we're gonna be working in front of their driveway for that day, we might ask them to park down the road a little ways if that works. If not, we can have a steel plate on site as we have every day with our crews anyway, which we could put over our trench that would be in front of their driveway. Another concern we had was with the emergency vehicles. So we've talked to the police chief about them helping us with the communication with the fire department every day, just letting them know where we're working, and then if there's a better way, if there may be an emergency, they could be in quick communication as to which way the emergency vehicles should come into the area. Along with the road closure too, I think Justin, I think I had a slide up, with the trash collection, so we've agreed, and, it works well for us and hopefully the residents too, on trash collection day. We'd have our crew foreman go up through and pick up I don't know if you guys have, if everyone has bins or whatever everyone might have, but collect the bins and bring them down to Opelousas Drive, where the trash company has agreed that would be a good spot for them to be able to pick up, trash and recycling. So we're 100% commitment on our end for that one. We'll bring the trash down early in the morning, and then once everything's picked up at the end of the day, when it's applicable for us to bring it back, we'll get everyone's bins back to them. Justin, I think I have one more slide, just kind of a timeline for everyone. With asking permission to get this project started a little bit earlier, I'll get into weather in a minute, but it's, as Keith said, it's a long project for us. It's a big project. So we basically have, 5 to 6 months time frame to get this project done. Our working hours during the day, so residents know, is, roughly 7:30 to 4 to 4:30, depends on how the day goes. So it's, like I said, it's a big project, but with the commitment of the road closure, it'll help us go a lot faster and keep everything running smoother. I just want to touch on weather conditions. So as we had that storm over this past weekend, we did not have any crews in on Monday. Gives the towns enough time to get everything, make sure everything's cleaned up and safe for our crews to be back on the street. I'd be in constant communication with the DPW. If we see a storm coming, if they're nervous, anyone's nervous about, it's ice storm, snowstorm, heavy rain, we would move all the equipment, everything off the street, and make sure the plows and sanders can get through with no issues. I spoke about emergency vehicles, so like I said, daily communication with everyone. That's the key to a successful project for us. I just kind of want to touch base, because I know it's always a concern for a lot of residents and our customers, quality of workmanship. So things have changed a lot over the years. We have, we have our union inspector that's out with the crew, with our contractor crew every day. So they're our eyes and ears along with my supervisors. So we're making sure that the crew is, excavating properly, maintaining the roads during the day, keeping a clean work area, making sure we don't leave any trash behind. We also have, I want to touch base too about our safety department and our quality control department. So safety and QC does spot checks on the crews throughout the week. Again, just to make sure our crews are being safe, but it's also safe for residents to be in and out of our work zones. Just a little bit more on that. So if we are able to work, say, roughly a 200-foot work zone, we would set up cone bars and cones on each end. So residents know that they can't come through, along with the police detail officer. When the trench is open during the day, the crew members are very cautious and make sure no one's out and about walking. If they are going to walk past us, the detail officer will help the resident get past. And then the biggest thing I just wanted to touch on, every day, at the end of the day, everything's backfilled, everything's paved and cleaned up by 4:30-ish in that time frame. That way there, the residents can come in and out at night with no concerns. Just a couple other things I wanted to touch on is the whole project as a whole. As we know, this is linked to the large UPS project. So just kind of wanted to talk about a little bit, it's the funding part of this piece. The good news, is that the town, we've committed to paving the street everywhere we do our tie-ins to the existing gas mains, and then the whole trench length, we've committed to curb-to-curb paving for the town. So we'll work with the DPW on details exactly for that. We usually like to let the trench settle for a little bit to make sure there's no issues before we do that full curb-to-curb paving. I think this pretty much covers everything I wanted to touch base. I'd love to take any questions. If anyone has any concerns, I can stay after the meeting if it's appropriate to talk about them after that too. But again, any questions?
Questions or comments? Thank you.
Yeah, when they move those trash bins, don't they have to be brought back to the right house because they're numbered?
Yeah, as long as they're numbered, we'll make
They're
sure.
those serial number. Like our recycle carts don't say like someone's address. So I would want to make, and plus if
Okay.
it was me, I would
Yeah.
want to make sure I got my bin
We
back
can
because
put
I
it-
clean it, and I wouldn't want someone else's bin back.
Yeah, so-
It may
so-
not be as
so-
clean as mine.
Yeah, so DPW is coming up with a sticker plan for them.
Okay.
So that they can go back to the right spot every night.
Perfect.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Can I
Carlos?
ask a follow-up? to
Go
that?
ahead.
So, if there are any issues, who would be the best point of contact for that resident to reach out to? Is it DPW? Is it Casella or?
I think for trash, I would say for us, before we start the project, we'll try and do a face-to-face with all the customers on that street, just kind of work through the process with them. We might have to ask if the trash has to be Appaloosa at a certain time. We might need a commitment from the customer just to make sure that, whether the trash bins are at the end of their driveway or, at their garage, we could work that out with each individual person. I believe there's only 5 houses,
Yeah, there's only 5.
so
Okay.
it's not too bad for us.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Mizikar, did you have a comment, question? Okay, so that's, anything, Teresa, go ahead.
I just to be clear, you're asking for a road closure. That's the request.
So yes, there's 2.
No, okay.
So depending on the weather, because now we're in that snow pattern, the first request, it would be for the road closure, which basically the duration of the project. The second request would be just to work basically the month of March, which would be in your winter moratorium.
If I can
Mr. Mizikar, go ahead.
just jump in too. So, the select board doesn't have a lot of experience in dealing with public utilities because we operate our own electric utility, which is the most frequent utility that comes before similar bodies to yours. So, Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 164, Section 70, provides authority to the select board to control the placement of utilities within public ways. So there's no gas main within Green Street, so part of your action tonight, in addition to what was mentioned, will actually be granting the location for the gas main to be located, providing those ancillary approvals. You have to have the public hearing, which is why it's set up this way, and setting any conditions that, Mr. Baldinger has laid out under the direction of the Public Works. So, again, it's the first time since I've been here that you're providing a grant of location for a public utility, but that is under your control since you control the opening of public ways and the location of utilities within them.
Thank you.
Sure.
May I rephrase my question?
Sure, go ahead.
Part of this is a road closure, understanding we're not the ones that are approving the road closure, but part of this process includes the road closure. Is that essentially effective
Well, you-
now through the completion of the project? Like, in what I've reviewed, there aren't timeframes around it. So I just want to be clear on, this is essentially for what is looking to be 6,
Yes.
7 months.
And the select board does have to approve the road closure, just like a normal 1-day, 1 or 2 one.
Okay.
This would be for the full length of the project in September.
Work on a day-to-day basis with openings at the end of every day.
Yes, yeah,
Right, right.
yes,
Yeah.
7:30 to 4:30 roughly, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions before?
No, I think I'll wait and see if there are
All right.
residents that.
This is a public hearing, so at this time, we want to open up. To any
Mr.
members of the
Chairman, I have a
community who are in
question.
the audience who'd like to make
Michelle's
comments.
had a shot.
Oh, sorry, Michelle, go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
the-
So am I
Mrs. Conlon,
understanding,
go
so
ahead.
the,
My apologies.
with,
if someone
in
wants to
regards to the road closure, it'll be closed from, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily, with being reopened in the evening. Is there, would local residents have the ability to pass through, during construction with, detail support, or is it, will it be closed to local traffic as well? So like residents trying to get to their homes, or would they have to detour all the way around?
They'll be able to get through with the support of the detail officer. Like I said, there might be a certain area where we're passing through. We'll work with a large steel plate where our resident will be able to drive over our trench to get into their driveway. But there, we just might have to ask the resident just to hang tight for maybe 5 minutes so we can, move some equipment and get that steel plate set in place. But it'll be, it's a short, we just need a few minutes to, move that plate. those, you know, they're large, well, twice the size of this table, so it takes a few minutes to move the steel plate.
All right, thank you for the clarification. I have a second question.
Go ahead.
Meg. So you mentioned that you have agreed to do full curb to curb paving after the trench settles. Do you have an idea, which I appreciate, you know, trenching roads often leads to like big like, pothole issues and surface issues. So do you have an idea how long typically the timing is between when you do the initial paving the trench and letting it settle to when you would do the full curb to curb paving? What does that, you know, are we talking about a month or 6 months? Is there any like ballpark of how long that would be?
We would work that out with the DPW, but normally we like to let that sit for over the winter. So if we're finished up midsummer, we could look at it in late fall. If everyone's comfortable with doing it then, we could have that conversation. But, you know, I'm not quite sure how the digging's gonna be on Green Street. I've driven it and seen the area. It doesn't look great with rocks and whatnot, so, you know, it might be the best to leave it for the winter. We do have our compaction testing that the crews do daily, so that, you know, our compaction is a good process. It's just sometimes when, you know, we're moving large rocks out of that, you know, out of our trench, we might get some settling.
One more question, if I may.
Go ahead.
If the trench is allowed to settle over the winter, and who's responsible for monitoring to make sure that, you know, large potholes don't open up, and, you know, issues where it could be a safety issue or cause property damage? Who would be responsible for monitoring that and filling potholes in the interim?
Yeah, that's on us.
Okay.
Our restoration department, once our crews are finished paving, when the project's complete, we do a final walkthrough with our restoration department because they'll be the ones that will do that final restoration after we're complete. But in conjunction with them and us in construction, we do, you know, maybe once a week, every other week, do a quick drive-through, just make sure everything looks safe and everything's holding up is the way we expect it to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I'll open it up to the public. It's a public hearing. I'd love to hear from you if there's anyone in the audience. Not seeing any takers. Colleagues, any final questions?
So we're usually hesitant to open roads during the moratorium period. What is the reason why? Is it because of snow removal? Is it because we don't want to disturb why don't we want to open the road?
Yeah, it's typically just because of winter conditions,
Okay.
right? Plowing and that sort of thing. Like for example, if there's a storm coming, they won't be allowed to use street plates. They have to fill the trench
Right.
and patch it so the plows can work, and they're fully aware of that.
Yeah, I read that in there.
process. So, but yeah, typically that's the reason. It is 100% directly related to snow plowing.
So it doesn't compromise the road in the future, it's just because of snow plowing?
Correct.
Okay.
May I? So, wouldn't starting it sooner, wouldn't there be higher risk of snow versus if we waited 2 months and it went into October? Like, I'm just trying to think of.
Well, I think it's more for their schedule. I think I would suggest that they're asking it to get it done early so they could hopefully finish it earlier in the season. And then it may give us that opportunity that we could pave it before winter also, if that comes about. But
Yeah, there's a few discussions back and forth with the police department. You know, it's sometimes if we're trying to get this done before really most of the summer months were upon us. When most days we'll need 3 or 4 detail officers. They were concerned that they may not, you know, come summer months, everyone's on vacation. They were a little bit concerned where they may not be able to supply us enough detail officers. And then again, just a little bit early start for the month of March we're hoping just to kind of shorten the process before next fall starts. So like he said, if everyone requests that get paved next fall, we might have the chance to do it then, instead of it letting it sit over the winter.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, I noted that we posted this public hearing and that we mailed it to 96 properties that abut this neighborhood. And I don't know if some of the residents that are here are butters, but they're not speaking. Maybe they're interested in hearing. I think about, like, this is a really big impact for some of these residents. And I guess I'm just a little surprised and concerned that maybe the impacts are not well known. So I didn't see what was sent, and I apologize if I missed it, to these residents. Was it just there's a public hearing, or how informed have they been? Or how much information has been provided to them to explain the length and the magnitude of this project?
So in the, and I apologize too, I didn't bring the letter. But in the mailing that we were sent out was the letter that was, the ad that was put in the newspaper, along with our community relations department, put together a letter just stating, Eversource is, coming to your neighborhood. We apologized in the letter, it will, like you said, it will be a lengthy project. But I think it comes down to where the daily communication comes from. Just with those, the residents that are on Green Street, we'll be able to get them in and out with no issues. As we move down the street, say the residents that live closer to Appaloosa, we'll kind of move away from them, and it'll be less of a headache for them as, we'll just progress down. So like I said, so if we're working the middle of Green Street, the residences that on either side of us will be able to go out either direction away from us. And that's what the crew and the detail officer will be there to help them with. So, and I understand it, it's a big project, it's a tight road. I think that's where when we met with the town, that's where the hope was to be able to close the street. That way we don't, anyone that's maybe making the cut-through path to the train station, they just go up and down, kind of give us that time frame. With the road closed, we can get a lot more pipe in the ground than having to stop and let cars through, especially on those tight corners, and the road's pretty small.
Mr. Dobson.
Yeah, Mrs. Flynn, I just wanted to add information about the public hearing advertisement that went out. So the language notified residents that there was going to be an installation of a new 8-inch plastic gas main on Green Street, that the new gas main would start at Appaloosa Drive and continue to the Grafton Town Line. And we did note that the project would be approximately 5 months in duration, and that portion of Green Street would be closed during approved working hours with access maintained for local traffic and emergency vehicles. Just wanted to add that.
And what's the mode for constant communication? So understanding there's a public relations department, but how do we communicate with residents to apprise them of progress?
Our union inspector, who's a union employee for Eversource, they're there boots on the ground every day. So that person, along with the crew leader for the contractor crew that'll be there, they will, so if they're working one section today, the following couple sections, we'll say, for next few days worth of work, they'll meet with those customers. They all, I can hand it out to everyone again. They have my email. I can get them, the supervisor that will be managing the project, I can get them their email if that works better for them. If a phone call works better, with it just being the 5 residents, it'll be pretty, light for us to be able to make that quick communication. And it's, we can meet with every resident, just jot down a few notes as to how they want to be communicated with.
Okay. You have a question?
No, just maybe more of a comment/request that we, oversee this tightly. I obviously want there to be direct line of communication with Eversource as needed, but, this is something that we are being asked to approve. And I want to make sure that we mitigate any, to every extent possible, disruption to residents. I understand that there will be pockets of disruption. You make it sound like, okay, there's going to be maybe a couple days of more disruption when I'm right in front of their home, and then it will move on to other neighbors. But, simple things like the trash, like, sure, if they put their trash out and someone takes care of it for them and, their bins are returned exactly where they left them, that's great. But when things like that start to not happen, you know, I just want to make sure that we as a town are the ones that are holding Eversource accountable to the commitments that,
Of course.
that they're making here. And again, I continue to be a little concerned, hoping that residents got the message and they know what is coming, but
Yep.
I want to make sure that we really spell it out for them so that they're prepared. So maybe a follow-up communication.
And I think one of the things that we could do with those abutters is we could send a communication out before that, right before they start to work too, so that they know exactly when it's gonna start, because I don't think we have an exact start date yet at
Nope.
this point, so we'll make sure that happens too. And those residents get that message.
I mean, it's not just the residents, right? It's anybody who uses that road to get to the train station.
Yep. And we can do it, we could do a news flash for the community too, so that they're aware.
Are we planning to use any of the electronic message boards?
We could do signboards at the
Road
end of
closed,
Yep.
the date that it starts, so that people have an idea. I mean, you're trying to get to that train for a train, you're gonna miss it if you don't know that road's closed.
Yeah, we can do signboards each end, like you said, with the time and of construction and, yep.
Any other questions? Any
May I have a follow-up,
questions?
just on Beth's comment?
Michelle, go ahead.
Thank you. With notifications, you know, we typically do local notifications because road closures typically only affect local traffic. But because that is a major route to access the MBTA station, perhaps we should send out a townwide notification.
Sure, we can do that.
And I believe it's town of Framingham, they have on their website, they have a banner at the top that with some of our work that's going on too. So if that works we could work with you guys to get a weekly, this is kind of where we're working, progress update.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just have
Go ahead,
some
Carlos.
clarifying questions on the timeline. I guess I was just curious, I think, to Ms. Cassavant's point about like why now during the moratorium? What is the urgency with starting the project now versus waiting until that the moratorium is lifted?
So I wanted to see how tonight went with, the thing with the month of March is we probably could just, we may not have to do the road closure in the month of March, but we'd like to get in there and do some of our test holes. Test holes is, just to verify other utilities, I just want to verify if water, sewer, any buried electric. Those test holes are just a small 4-foot by 5-foot hole that we dig down just to verify, so we know if there are existing utilities. A few test holes just for a line assignment to make sure we're, staying far enough away from trees and whatever other structures there may be. So I think the month of March wouldn't be the whole month, but at least a few weeks of March would be a few test holes on Green Street, and then, the rest of the project kind of getting through. I will say, the road closure is very important to us. If the board is worried about, maybe would really want us to hold off until April 1st, we could work on the Grafton side. They're okay with us starting immediately. I don't want to push you guys into anything you're not comfortable with. So, if the road closure, like I said, is the most important part for us, but if you're not okay with, starting early, we can work around that too.
I mean, I just think it's a disruption. Might as well start it and get it done sooner rather than knowing that it's coming and it's gonna prolong it. I don't know, that waiting a month.
I think waiting a month gives us more opportunity to communicate and prepare people for this, so
No, I
if
guess
it's sort of like, no, if I had a choice, I'd choose a later date. I think starting it right away. Before we close the public hearing, does anyone want to ask any questions or express any concerns? I don't want to force you into it, but I also just, I know it can be uncomfortable, but I want to make sure that your questions are addressed.
And if you could come up to
Yeah,
my
we have-
microphone now, please.
Sorry, and you have to say your name.
If you could have your name and address, please.
Gary Hebert, 245 Green Street. The only thing I would say is that we would hope that your comment about supervision is taken seriously, including afterwards. I mean, the last big project on Green Street which I don't know if any of you folks remember, started out and then had to be redone because there were boulders rolling into the street. And then it was redone in this hideous riprap stuff. And we asked if they could put up trees, and there's a staggered rows of trees, half of which are dead now. So I would hope that there'll be follow through to to make sure that things that were said that were going to be done actually get done.
Thank you.
To be clear, that was not Eversource, correct?
No, that was the private development office.
Okay, but I understand his point about town oversight and making sure that,
Yeah.
but I
Holding accountable.
want to draw the distinction that that wasn't Eversource's
I guess the
work.
question is, do we want to wait till April 1st on the closure, but start with the lighter stuff?
How long do you think it would take to do more messaging? Like, can we split the difference and go with a mid-March date? Like, that would give us
Let's start messaging now.
6 weeks or it would give us a month to message.
I mean, we're happy to provide any additional messaging, and we know we sent out the 97. Just a reminder, there are only 6 houses on Green Street, so it's not 97 houses on the road that's being done. We're happy to message as much as we can. I don't know how much that reflects, but what was the radius for the abutters?
It was about 1,000 feet.
1,000 feet.
We went out far because we wanted to make sure that we got Appaloosa and some of South Street, because we know those people use it as a shortcut.
So it's a smaller universe.
So you're talking about sort of direct residential
Contact.
road impact versus residential use.
Correct.
Okay.
So we comfortable with the original request then?
So it's 5 residents, 5 homes. It will always be no more than 5 homes in the direct zone of work.
Correct.
And those people have been spoken to personally.
Not personally, not yet, because I didn't want to really go too far forward with it yet, just to see, how tonight went, if there was,
March
it's,
Start the application now.
but, it's no issues going knocking on doors, after hour, during the day, after hours. It's, full commitment on my side.
Go 3 weeks from now, or Monday?
3 weeks from now, March 1st.
Roughly. I mean, March 1st is a weird date, though. What day of the week does it fall? Saturday?
It's a Saturday.
So go the 3rd, open it up the 3rd, so it gives opportunity to talk to those residents door to door.
I want to make sure those 5 residents really are aware.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. I like the idea of electronic billboards to let people know who are using that road that it is coming and
Yeah.
to make alternate plans.
Yeah, and I will get those boards out as soon as possible. I just need to get permission from the state. Same with our traffic management plan, we just need to get a special permit for the signs to be out, which I've already spoken to them. It's not an issue, it's just I gotta do the formal process, so.
So that's signs on Route 20, but we could put a sign.
Right,
We
we could
could
put-
put a sign in Appaloosa, we could have put a sign at
Yeah.
Tech and Graft and Green Street too.
Yeah, I could do that right away, and then once the state okays it, we can move it out
Yep.
to Route 20.
So we're approving the road closure as of March 3rd.
Yep.
So if there are no other comments or questions, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Have been moved in second, and a roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavan?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
Aye. So now we've closed the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Sorry, let me
Take your
pull
time.
up my, motion. It doesn't have to be amended, though, to reflect the March 3rd date.
So approve the related road closure as of
Okay.
starting March 3rd, right?
So move to approve the request from Eversource Energy for the installation of a gas main as outlined in the construction design documents prepared by BL Companies dated January 12th, 2024? Or is it 2025? 2024.
25.
And authorize the Department of Public Works to approve the de minimis changes in the field if necessary. I further move to approve the related road closure and to lift the road closure moratorium as it relates to this project effective March 3rd, 2025, subject to the requirements outlined in the memorandum prepared by the Department of Public Works.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded, and a roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming this evening.
I appreciate it.
If we could get, as this moves forward as well, progress, as this moves forward as well, communicate constantly to the town as well as at our meetings, so we know how it's going, given the duration of it, okay?
Yeah, and I'm sure Keith's going to attest, we've had daily communication with Nick from DPW on our other projects. We'll continue with that. And then if there's anyone here that wants communication also, we can set that up.
You can do it through town manager's report, just an update. Okay. That'll work for everybody? All right, thank you.
Okay, yeah, Keith, if you want to help with that.
Next item on the agenda under new business, to review and act to authorize the town manager to execute an easement deed with Prologis, Inc. for an easement in town-owned property located at 20 Centec Boulevard. Mr. Mizikar?
Board members, you'll recall, with authorization from the annual town meeting in May, the town put out to bid a easement of roughly 2 acres of land at a piece of town-owned property at 20 Centec Boulevard. This will provide access to the site being developed by Prologis for a UPS. The town received a proposal to acquire the easement for $225,000. The board has accepted that at a previous meeting, and now we're looking to finalize the execution of the deeds and requesting that I, the town manager, be authorized to execute them on behalf as Prologis is moving forward with the construction.
Any questions or comments? Document's been reviewed and prepared by council, right?
It has
So,
been.
any questions or comments? Is there a motion?
Move the board to authorize the town manager to execute the easement deed with Prologis for the town property located at 20 Centec Boulevard.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded, and a roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
Me, aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is to review and act to approve the town manager's appointment of Emily Petro, 8 Canna Drive, to the Conservation Commission to fill a vacant seat with a term that expires on June 30th, 2025 pursuant to MGL Chapter 40, Section 8C. This item requests our vote to confirm the town manager's appointment of Emily Petro to the Conservation Commission. A vacancy arose when Martha Gouch announced her resignation. The vacancy was advertised with 2 applicants, and 2 applicants were received. Applicants met with Mr. Mizikar and the current Conservation Committee Chair, Mr. Polito, and the town manager selected Ms. Petro to fill the vacancy. Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8C requires that we confirm appointments to the Conservation Commission in a town manager form of government. Any questions or comments? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, and roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
Me, aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is to review and act on the one-day beer and wine license application of Michael L. Duquette of St. Mary's Parish for the St. Mary's Parish Lenten Fish Fry on March 7, 2025, from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. This is a repeat request. As a result, they're not required to be here this evening. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded, and a roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
Me, aye. Next item in the agenda, motion carries unanimously. Next item is to review and act on the one-day all-alcohol license application from Rami Chamoun of St. Mary's Syriac Orthodox Church for a birthday party on March 1st, 2025, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Same thing, it's a request from a party that's been here before, so no requirement that they come in front of the board. Paperwork appears to be in order. If there are no questions or comments, entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I've been moved and seconded. A roll call vote. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
Me, aye. I'm not going to call myself in the third person. Next item is to review and act on the one-day alcohol license application from Denise Higgins of St. John's High School for an annual gala on April 12, 2025, from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. So it's the event scheduled for the 12th from 5 to 11, but the alcohol will be delivered on April 11th and disposed of on the 13th, hence it's a two-day license. Any questions or comments? If not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, a roll call vote. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
Me, aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next item, thank you. Next item on the agenda to review and to an act to call a special town meeting for Monday, April 14th, 2025 at 7 p.m. Mr. Ballinger.
Yep. Good evening again. So tonight, we're requesting that the board set a special town meeting date for April 14th to provide town meeting members and the entire community with complete and detailed information regarding a critical proposal addressing significant facility challenges at the Department of Public Works facilities at 211 South Street and Town Hall. At this special town meeting, we will ask town meeting members to consider approving a borrowing authorization for a $30.5 million investment. This project has been carefully developed within a strict budget to minimize financial impact on residents while addressing long overdue space needs that are essential to maintaining and improving town services. Moving forward in April keeps the project on track and allows us to take advantage of a more favorable construction market, potentially saving the town a significant amount of money. The project team and DPW staff have been working diligently to refine the design to the 60% completion level using funding approved at the fall special town meeting. As of this week, we have officially brought Fontaine Brothers on board as a construction manager to ensure the project can be delivered within the established budget alongside our designers, HKT Architects, and our OPM Vertex. If we delay this request until the May annual town meeting members would not have the opportunity to fully engage with the project before the debt exclusion ballot question is presented to voters on May 6th. This sequence limits the ability for meaningful discussion and informed decision-making. Additionally, any delay in approval could increase project costs due to inflation and market fluctuations, putting the financial feasibility of the project at risk. To reiterate, this $30.5 million borrowing authorization would be structured as follows. $15.5 million will be funded with the existing utility rate model across the water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste enterprise funds, and the remaining $15 million will be funded through a debt exclusion. If town meeting approves this borrowing authorization, the debt exclusion will then be placed on the ballot at the annual town election on May 6th, where voters will have the opportunity to make the final decision on whether to fund the project or not. To ensure that town meeting members and residents are fully informed about this project and the operations of the Department of Public Works, we will be hosting 3 public outreach meetings in the coming months. These sessions will provide opportunities for residents to ask questions, review project details, and better understand how the DPW facilities support the town's essential services. This project represents a long-term investment in our town's infrastructure, supporting both the operational needs of our departments and the quality of services provided to our residents. Setting the April 14th, 2025 special town meeting date will ensure that town meeting members are fully informed and able to make a well-considered decision at the appropriate time. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
Are you able to provide the dates for the outreach meetings for people who are listening?
Sure. So I did write it down. So the first date is March 19th. It's a 6:30 to 8:30 meeting. Second date is April 2nd, which is 5:30 to 7:30. And then the third date is April 23rd, which is 5:30 to 7:30.
That would be after town. After the town meeting?
Yeah, so there'll be 2 prior to town meeting and then 1 between town meeting and just the election.
Any questions?
I'm sorry, could you clarify that? You said there's 2 before town meeting,
Mhm.
and then how many after town meeting?
1.
Just 1.
Between April 14th and May 6th, there's 1 on April 23rd.
Okay. Any reason why we're not looking at staggering the time of day? They're all like in the evening. Is there any value to doing it earlier in the
We
day?
could look at doing one during the day, but we haven't seen a great turnout in some of recent outreach meetings that we've had, but we could definitely put one up to a midday or afternoon. program.
Are all of these in person or are there
They're
virtual?
all in person.
Okay, any virtual
Um,
opportunities?
We don't have that planned right now, but it's something that we can look at to do.
Okay.
We are going to include SMC in the process to actually tape the drop-in events where because it'll be a drop-in event, so you can come anytime within those 2 hours, and it'll be set up with stations for the actual project and the design, and they can speak to the architects and the construction manager and OPM, and then there'll be other stations that are directly related to what each division of DPW does, because I think that's important for people to understand what they do.
Thank you.
The thing we could consider too is a brief video recording of there's a lot of information out there, but a high-level summary of what the project is, what you just talked about, and what it means in terms of, it's largely for DPW renovation using a large part of the existing footprint to leverage cost savings. And then life safety aspects here, that things after 27-year-old HVAC system, for example, need to be updated, but
Right.
the focus is the DPW building in that location.
Yep.
Maybe, I think it'd be worthwhile to have a brief overview as well, and any touches we can get, maybe even tours again. I think there were
this-
recordings, so
Yeah.
this is drop-in event,
But
what
it's
about-
at South Street.
Yeah, we're
so
actually
people can see the
looking.
buildings.
Yeah,
Okay.
looking to have these events at South Street.
Okay, good.
No, but I think, your point is good that, the video tours are helpful for people, especially if they can't get out, but then also like just kind of a commercial of what the project entails. I think the public will be interested in this being a renovation expansion, right? We've heard plenty about reusing buildings, and we've seen that the highway garage can be renovated and does not need to be torn down, and that's a huge cost savings to the town, to be able to use that building and repurpose some of the space.
And be future-ready, right? To go with our pattern of having buildings for at least 50 years. Town hall is going to be a lot longer than that, and we have a good history of going longer, so. Not any, Carlos?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think to my colleague's point about making sure that everyone's engaged and involved and has all the information, I imagine a lot of this information lives on the website, but
It does, and we continue to update it. We expect actually new renderings and drawings are due this week from our designer. And then we have a committee meeting next Wednesday, so those items will go before the committee and then become public and load on our website.
that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, is there a motion? All we're voting on tonight is setting the date and time.
I move the board call a special town meeting for Monday, April 14th, 2025 at 7 PM.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded. A roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next item is to review and discuss action dates relative to the May 2025 annual town meeting. Mr. Mizikar?
Thank you. So as traditional, this time of the year, we're looking to set forth the path towards the annual town meeting, given its importance. And this evening, we've laid out a schedule for you over the next 90-plus days to get us there. And happy to highlight a couple of those. A lot of them mirror the budget process. Let me just pick a few. So the board will actually review the annual town meeting warrant the first time at your March 11th meeting, so in 1 month. The board will likely sign the annual town meeting at your meeting on March 25th. And the weekend between those two dates would be the deadline for the citizens petition, March 18th, 2025. The planning board will hold their series of hearings throughout that time, including, which are always on the first Thursday of the month, April 3rd and May 1st. The Finance Committee will thoroughly review the actual warrant that the board produces, along with all the details and the motions, on 2 consecutive Thursdays in April, the 10th and the 17th. The town meeting itself is proposed for Monday, May 19th, and all new and existing town meeting members would have packets mailed to them on Friday, May 9th. So just around the corner, about 3 months ahead of us, and we look forward to going through the process with the board.
So no action required
No
tonight.
action required.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is to review and act on the planning board's recommendation on the proposed zoning bylaws amendments for the May 2025 annual town meeting, and refer said amendments back to the planning board for public hearings. This is a procedural item, right?
It is procedural.
I'll hand it over to you.
Mr.
Oh, sorry.
will walk us
Sorry,
through
Mr.
the slides.
McGoldrick. Sorry.
All set.
I'll hand it to you.
Thank you. Christopher McGoldrick, Director of Planning and Economic Development. So on January 9th, the Planning Board referred 2 articles for the Select Board's consideration for placement on the draft warrant. The request is for it to be referred back to the Planning Board for their holding of the public hearings, the dates of which Mr. Mizikar just outlined. In addition to that, we are scheduled for, tentatively for March 6th as well. So as tradition, we'll open at March 6th and continue those public hearings through those other dates to allow for robust communication with the public as we develop those further. The 2 articles that we do have proposed, one is for accessory dwelling units. This is related to the act of the Massachusetts Legislature related to accessory dwelling units. We are looking to simply take our existing accessory dwelling units regulations for the town center district and move that language into a new section under accessory uses, so it would be town-wide in line with what the act already mandates. So this is a simple procedural change to align with that legislation. The second article is related to the definition of easements and frontage. This is related to takings and rendering the potential for a taking to render a property non-conforming. This would make that a exemption for those properties, so that if a municipal action takes property that would, for example, a roadway taking for expansion of that roadway in the right-of-way, it would not render any setback nonconformities effective. So those properties would not need additional regulatory relief as a result of any municipal action.
Okay. Any questions?
I think maybe just clarify process here. I think we all recognize there's a heightened level of sensitivity around zoning, bylaws, and changes. So we're being asked to send this to the planning board for consideration, for public hearing process, et cetera, for them to finalize. They will, we approve the warrant articles. They will make recommendations, we will make recommendations, et cetera. But long-term, like, the bottom line, this is all to go to town meeting for town meeting to vote on. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear. If they're watching this, if they're like, what does this mean? If they're skeptical and they're like, there's a hidden agenda, like, now is the time. Listen, go to the public hearing, engage with the planning board, but ultimately, this is not us making any decisions. This is us just preparing for it to go before town meeting, for town meeting to deliberate and vote on.
Tonight is procedural to kick this back to the planning board to start that process.
Right, because these are the articles that are recommended by the planning board.
Correct.
Or-
So these articles, they've been reviewed in draft form by the planning board. They're referring them to the select board as, for your consideration as the kind of the authority that approves the warrant for that simply to be placed on. That's the action this evening. If that is acceptable to the select board, we will then begin that public hearing process on those dates as outlined, where the public can engage. The planning board and select board will have a process for their review and recommendation on those articles, as well as finance committee. And then all of that will go to town meeting with the final motion language in the town meeting packet for town meeting to vote on.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Any more questions or comments? If not, is there a motion?
Move the board submit the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to the planning board for public hearings.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded, and a roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavan?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. McGoldrick, for coming this evening. Next item on the agenda, which Mr. Mizikar had given a small preview earlier, it's the review and discuss fiscal year 2025 town manager goals. Mr. Mizikar.
Great, thank you, board members. I will first start by updating my goals over the last 12 weeks, and I will look forward to a new set of priorities and areas of focus for the coming 12. So this is the third segment of goals. Justin, you can move forward. As we've discussed at the outset of the fiscal year, look forward to a new process in managing my priorities over the course of the year under much shorter cycles to hopefully be more tangible in the actions that I personally work on, transparent in the processes that I take, and tolerant, being flexible over the course of the year as things change drastically from the beginning of any fiscal year to the end. So under that process, we had two previous segments that were identified, July 16th through October 8th and November 1st through January 25th. So I'll first start by talking a little bit about that most recent segment that went through January 25th. Justin, if you can move forward. I guess first, before I get there, broadly, as I set out work over the entire course of the year and tied in strategies associated with all five strategic outcome areas of the strategic plan is where I started. And then within each segment, I'm picking a variety of the focus areas and the sub-strategies to dig in a little bit deeper on. Justin, you can move forward. And you can move forward one more slide. So within the most recent segment, there are two core priorities. First, we're guide and support the creation of an economic development strategy within Focus Area 4, specifically working with Planning and Economic Development and the Shrewsbury Development Corporation for the procurement of a consultant. During that process, we identified a $104,000 grant that we were able to use, laid out an economic development plan RFP and scope of work. That was advertised as of today, and proposals are due back from any interested firms on March 5th. We stood back up the SDC after the board appointed a full complement of members, and the SDC jumped right in by helping us shape the scope of the work and will support the selection of the consultant. Justin, you can move forward. So, as development continues within the community, and I apologize for the size of the details on the screen, but as development continues in the community, and we're always looking to manage the natural resources that are available to us and the public infrastructure that contains them, we wanted to take the opportunity to review any recent water and sewer capacity analysis and provide updates on them. We work directly with specialized engineering firms and consultants and town staff in assessing the current environments and developing demand projections on the water side. That work that was done takes into consideration projections of population and known development within the community on the commercial side. So briefly, I'll just touch on a couple points that we have. Our average daily water demand is projected to revise from its current 3.7 million gallons per day to roughly 4.33 million gallons per day in 2045. During this time frame, we will continue to explore the options that are available to us to be able to remove more water in under the capacity that we have with our current wells and our water treatment plant. So that will, of course, exceed the total permitted withdrawal limit that we have right now of 4.17 million gallons per day. So we have some work to do. It's sure it's a 20-year horizon from now, but water and sewer permitting is not a quick and easy process. Fortunately, on the water side, we have a lot of opportunity to look for efficiencies within our system because we continue to be plagued by unaccounted for water. We've done significant work over the last year to move our, enhance and modernize our metering, as we've thoroughly reviewed the system to ensure there was no physical leaks within it or only minor physical leaks within it. And we're now moving to more mechanical and technological means to identifying the sources of unaccounted for water. So unaccounted for water briefly is the difference between the amount of water that we pump from the grounds and the amount of water that we bill through our quarterly billing processes, minus fire activities and hydrant flushing activities. So we're still well over the Mass DEP limit. This is something that's plagued the community for too long. But with the recent work, not only over the last year, but in the future with an advanced metering initiative, we look to greatly curb this and ensure that we're utilizing all the resources and billing for those resources to maintain an appropriate rate structure as well. As I previously mentioned, the water demand is expected to grow to 4.33 million gallons per day. And our maximum daily demand is projected to be at 6.31 million gallons per day. That second part would exceed the current supply capacity, which is set at 6 million gallons a day, or a 0.31 million gallon per day shortfall. So we will now turn to working to ensure that we have mitigation strategies in place to address both the average daily demand and the maximum daily demand through a variety of means, through our consulting engineering, look at our infrastructure itself, replacing existing wells to ensure we have the most efficient and wells that we can, and removing any hydraulic restrictions that we know we have within our system. So the daily demands, both average and maximum, are something that we can work to without extreme or extremely significant investments within our infrastructure, but it's something that we need to focus on, and we're going to begin this work right away and find a path forward for both permitting and any physical impediments to ensuring we have an adequate water supply for the community, given the growth trends that we're experiencing on residential and commercial side of things. It's not insurmountable, but it's something that we can work towards. Sewer capacity mirrors water demand capacity. Our primary treatment is handled through the Westboro treatment plant. The overall plant is shared by the town of Westboro and Shrewsbury and the town of Hopkinton. The overall plant has reached 80% of its permitted capacity, and Shrewsbury's individual flows hover right around 80% of our total limit that we're allowed to send. So it's been almost 10 years now since we started diverting flows away from the Westboro treatment plant and sending them to the Upper Blackstone facility, which is a great opportunity for the community. It's a unique opportunity that we have and that we will benefit from. But we're also focused on modernizing and upgrading the Westboro treatment plant, not only to ensure environmental quality from the flow after it's treated, but also to ensure the residents' and businesses' demands in Shrewsbury are met under the growing conditions. So Justin, if you can move forward. So I drafted and sent a letter to the Westboro treatment plant on February 3rd outlining the town of Shrewsbury's concerns with reaching 80% of the capacity, identifying the triggers associated with the DEP permitting requirements once we reach that 80% capacity, and beginning to engage with the treatment plant board, which of course, half of the members are appointed by this body to ensure that before we get many more years behind us and even closer to the full capacity of the plant, that we're looking to address and modernize that system. So, you know, I'm happy with the work and the analysis that we got to do over the last 12 weeks. Not only two kind of mutually beneficial activities that we undertook. One, looking to work with the Shrewsbury Development Corporation to help define economic development outcomes and priorities for this community, which is something that we haven't really had the opportunity to do in the past outside of some broad goals in the master plan, but then also ensuring that, you know, if that growth comes, that we're able to understand what our water and sewer capacity challenges may be, and that we can appropriately address those for the community. So I'm happy to answer any questions about segment 2 goals before I go into what we're looking for over the next 12 weeks.
Any response yet on the letter?
The treatment plant board actually meets for the first time tomorrow as
Okay.
a full body, and I did receive an email from board member Fran Zaretti, who is, of course, a Shrewsbury appointee, asking to have a conversation, which I greatly appreciate, and we'll take him up on that.
Okay, thanks. Questions on what was just presented? Comments?
Question, Kevin. So you've done the study and now you understand a little bit more in terms of longer-term planning, what is needed. How will this sort of flow into your ongoing goals?
So it will be a priority and initiative of the Department of Public Works at this point to chart that path forward, and I'll certainly stay on top of it, but I don't want to honestly lose another day in the 20-year period, because DEP permitting often takes, 10 to 12 years, and we have a lot of design work and identifying the challenges to overcome. So it's something that we're going to stay on top of, but it will definitely be delegated as a key priority of Public Works.
Any other questions? If not, continue, please.
So, within the kind of key focus areas of fiscal sustainability and resource management and efficiency and innovation and operations is a focus area for the next 12 weeks for me. One objective, it's really cross-cutting, and it really centers on ensuring that we're efficient and effective in our operations. So really looking to acknowledge the realities that we see each and every year in our budget process, that we have only so much funding, and that funding provides limited opportunities for us to take on so many strategic initiatives that, talented staff across the organization know would benefit the residents and help us drive towards the vision that we've set for 2030. So we greatly need to explore internal optimization and external partnerships that can help us enhance our service delivery while mitigating and reducing costs. So I want to focus on those opportunities and explore and set an initial path forward in areas that seem ripe for improved partnerships and internal optimization. This will continue to allow us to focus on resident experience and having services that are citizen-centric, so we can value residents' time and meet them where they wish to engage with us. Ensuring employee experience and productivity, that their time is going to the highest impact tasks. We can't afford to lag behind with our business process improvement and utilization of technology, wasting resources on inefficiency. We need staff to be able to working in those higher impact areas. And we need to look broadly across our key lines of business, our functional areas that Mr. Snowden laid out in the budget process, public safety, administration and finance, human services, community development, to ensure that we're efficient between those departments and the silos don't exist. So we certainly serve a broad mission across those functional areas, and I think we have plenty of opportunity to bridge the gap between strategy and execution to both enhance resident experience and employee experience. So I want to ensure that we're taking action and making sure that we're planning appropriately for the entire fiscal year 2026 timeframe and how we're budgeting given the limited resources that we have. So this will attempt to tackle cost savings initiatives through reducing operational inefficiencies, limiting operational impacts, partnering with communities across the region more thoughtfully to align our operations and share costs better than we have in the past, and leverage technology, including artificial intelligence, to optimize our business processes and move away from spending resources in administrative functions and allow staff to focus on those higher impact tasks. So it's a rather broad initiative. It ends around the time of town meeting, and I hope to be able to take advantage of that time frame to get us over the hump. There may be seed funding that we need, consultants to engage with and help leverage things like technology, business process improvement, and review from an external standpoint our existing processes. And I greatly look forward to working with town managers and other municipal officials within the region to revisit our existing regional partnerships to ensure we're getting the greatest value out of them and leverage new relationships if there's an opportunity to do that. So this is a little bit broader than any of the prior 12-week goals and likely will extend in one way or another into the future, as many of the initiatives in the previous 24-plus weeks have, but I look forward to answering any questions that the board has.
Questions or comments?
Just a comment that, now that we have a director in place at DPW, you can kind of offload something that you have recognized as an important area of focus for the town and for our future growth, and be able to hand that off to someone so that you can continue to focus on other areas, as you outlined, where we need to be thinking about, how to improve and optimize. And I also always like to hear about, looking at regional partners and finding ways to bring efficiencies to what we're doing by partnering with others. So I definitely support those objectives.
Consistent with what Mr. Snowden presented earlier with the competing asks that we have from our departments, whether related to CapEx or FTEs, we have fiscal constraints, and this is the way to go forward, right? We're leveraging efficiencies where we can and looking at potentially new ways of doing business. Regionalize where we can. It's worked well in many areas for us, and maybe opportunities for that, because that's going to be the challenge going forward. We have within our overall financial system and structure, we have constraints, and this is the best way going forward to be able to meet as many of the needs that we have, and really continuously examining what we do, and also really best practices talking to town managers. And I know you do that, you're very active at the state level too, but this just gives another opportunity for us to examine what we do, find better ways to do it, maybe pooling resources, obviously, economies of scale, and let's see where it goes. It's a pretty bold initiative. I think it's going to yield us a lot of great results, and I think it's going to be one of those things going forward that you'll always be doing. So thank you. Carlos.
If I may, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Mizikar, appreciate you outlining your goals and your priorities for the next 12-week cycle. I was just curious if you could provide maybe a reflection on how you've managed your time, with the previous 2 cycles and how you're balancing all of those priorities, since it's a lot, and appreciate all the work that you do and the staff do, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you asking the question because it takes dedicated time and, you know, I personally have to set time aside in my schedule to focus on these areas, and it's not done without a really robust and high-performing staff that the community has afforded us to work with. I appreciate the work of my team. It allows me to kind of explore these opportunities and work with a dedicated staff that we have to always fine tune the things that we're doing. So in some ways I feel a little silly talking about trying to find improvements within the organization, but this is going to be because we do it all the time. But this is really going to be a deeper dive and a more focused effort that, you know, as Ms. Cassavant said, that we haven't had the opportunity to do really in the last few years, and that's enough time to not only have technology get out ahead of us in a variety of ways, but also the organization has grown and changed, and we always need to look at how it goes. So I get the opportunity to do this because we have a great team and have key functional leads overseeing a lot of the day-to-day stuff, and this gives me the opportunity to work with those internal and external partners. And one of the things I'm really excited to do is kind of bring together a group of town managers from across the state and engage with some experts on artificial intelligence this spring to see how municipalities can really leverage that opportunity to augment staff and improve business processes.
I think that's great, and I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, where we go with learning more about AI and how we can utilize some features from that growing technology. I also appreciate in here, I feel like I've talked about public engagement and all that stuff throughout this whole meeting, but I know it's a priority of ours and priority of yours, and it's consistent with feedback that we're hearing that, you know, folks want to be more involved and engaged with our local government. So appreciate you focusing on that resident experience and also the employee experience, because you need both to work well in order to serve the residents of our community. So really appreciate you focusing on these areas.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I can't,
Hand up. No?
I can't tell.
Okay, well, thank you. There's nothing else. Appreciate that. There's no action required. Now we're at correspondence. Letter dated January 29th, 2025, from Timothy McGlinchey, Director, Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Project, regarding 2026 preliminary budget notification and total assessment estimate. Shrewsbury's preliminary assessment estimate is $97,715, so noted. Next item is a letter received February 4th, 2025, from Ron Hughes, 7 Westwood Road, regarding the vote on MBTA, so noted. And the last item is an email dated February 4th, 2025, from Jen Rowrig, I apologize if I got that wrong, 18 Williamsburg Court, Unit 13, regarding concerned resident of Shrewsbury, and I'll respond to her now that that's been read in correspondence and so noted. So if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I've been moved and seconded, and a roll call vote is required. Mrs. Flynn?
Aye.
Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mrs. Conlon?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. See you on February 25th. Thank you for joining us.